Any chance of the fixtures letting up a little bit for Mikel Arteta's Arsenal? Absolutely no chance. In the next week, we go to Newcastle, Inter and Chelsea. This is the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou, and on this episode, we'll focus on the trip to St James's Park. Let's get into it. It's the Chronicles of a Gooner. Hey everybody, how are you? Happy Friday. It is a miserable Friday here in London, as tends to be the case with the weather here at this time of year. It is horrible, it is cold, it is windy, not that wet yet, but that could still come a little bit later on in the day. I hope you've all had a good week so far. It was quite enjoyable, wasn't it, watching that Carabao Cup game. Arsenal went out there and played their stuff and really looked confident and, you know, as if they'd sort of clicked into gear. You know, Zinchenko and Jorginho were pulling the strings in midfield. Ethan Nwaneri was brilliant again. Gabriel Jesus scored, and hopefully that'll be the beginning of him improving his form, generally speaking. Yeah, I'm aware of who the opposition were, and I'm aware of the fact that Saturday's test is going to be a much bigger one, but we're going to bring in a lot more of the big guns into the starting 11, and that makes for a very, very interesting game up at a place where we were robbed last year. And there's no packaging that up in any other way. I've just been speaking to a Newcastle United fan on a podcast who seemed to acknowledge himself that, yeah, the goal that they scored, it shouldn't have stood. I've been on two different outlets with Newcastle fans this morning. One of them sort of didn't really comment, and we didn't go down that route, but the other one sort of kind of admitted that they robbed us last year, which I don't know made me feel a lot better about the situation. But listen, Newcastle and Arsenal has become a bit of a rivalry lately. There's a little bit of an edge to this game. Eddie Howe, Jason Tindall, who seems to be the most spotlight-hungry assistant coach on the planet, will be involved, I'm sure. Mikel Arteta obviously has a bit of an edge to him, so do some of his staff, and that has led to a few confrontations over the last couple of seasons. Grumbles from both sides about the other side's style at times, and the dark arts come into this fixture very, very much. But yeah, it's a big game. It's a game at the start of what is a really, really difficult run for us, and there's no shying away from it. Like, I keep saying it to people because I constantly get asked on any outlet that I go on, are Arsenal as good this year? Can Arsenal replicate what they did last year? Can they challenge until the very end, just like they did last season? And the truth is, I've got no reason to believe that they can't. Not at this stage in the season. People look at the league table and they panic and they worry and they go, oh, well, look, we're X amount of points behind X side and that means we're in trouble and all the rest of it. But you look at our fixtures, guys, in comparison to those of the teams that we're expected to compete against. And it makes perfect sense that we're a little bit off the pace right now. And that's without even factoring in all the injury problems and issues that we've experienced in these opening months of the season. So let's not be down in the dumps. Let's not, obsess over the league table at this stage. What you need to be going into the final months of the season, as we've learned, is in contention. And as long as we're there, as long as we're in the race, come the business end of the season, there's no reason to believe that this Arsenal side can't go on and take one further step by achieving what we've all dreamed of this team achieving now for the last, 20 years? So, yeah, let's see how this one goes at the weekend. As I say, start of a really, really difficult run. As I mentioned in the intro, Inter away in midweek before that trip to Stamford Bridge. It's going to be a real testing time. And we've still got some injury problems. And Mikel Arteta, at the time we're live right now, has just wrapped up his press conference. So we'll bring you updates with regards to the fitness of some key players. He's been speaking about that. Never really gives anything away, Mikel Arteta, but sometimes you can read between the lines and sometimes you can take at least something from what he's had to say. It's a 12:30 kickoff, which I hate. I think it's the worst kickoff time of the lot. It just makes for at times flat atmospheres when ordinarily they'd be pretty good. I guess in this instance that might suit us because St James's Park is a very atmospheric place. Does the fact that it's a 12:30 game maybe take the sting out of that a little bit? I don't know. But obviously having played on Wednesday night and having to travel up to Newcastle, it's not ideal that the game is a 12:30 kickoff. I suppose the positive is that it gives us a bit of extra time before we play Inter, if you want to look at it that way. But there's something about 12:30 kickoffs that make me feel very, very uncomfortable. And I always have. Let's say a few hellos because there's a fair few of you in the live chat with me this morning. Thank you so much for joining me live on this edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. If you're watching this back or listening to this via the audio platforms, a big hello to you guys too. There is a Patreon piece dropping a little bit later on today because I owe you one, so stay tuned for that. And of course, we'll have the match day reaction Patreon pod, which will be with you guys shortly after the conclusion of Newcastle United versus Arsenal tomorrow afternoon. I am traveling tomorrow because I'm not going to the Arsenal game. I am commentating on another Premier League game, but thankfully it's the 5:30, which means I've got enough time to watch the Arsenal game before, take that all in full, churn out a quick Patreon podcast as well before I need to get cracking and get going with my work. So I'm on duty for Wolves versus Crystal Palace. I've never commentated at Molineux before, so that's something new for me. Very, very much looking forward to that. Not looking forward to the drive, but looking forward to the game at least. A few hellos to Tom. We've got Derek who says, "G'day, I hope you and the fam are doing well. Congrats on your coverage of the game the other day." Thank you, mate. Really, really appreciate that. It blows my mind when you do a game for Arsenal and you see that the highlights go out to so many people. Obviously, you can watch the full games back on arsenal.com as well. It always amazes me how many people message you and go, "Was that you? I thought that was you. I listened to the pod and I thought that was you." Yep, it was me. And it was an honour, as it always is, to work for the greatest club on earth. Big hello to Nelson. Wesbird's with us. Madik is with us, who's a new subscriber. Welcome. I hope you're good. Hope you're well. Thank you so much for joining me. Jan Torres says, "Hit the like button. Otherwise, Harry will not be angry, but very, very disappointed with you." Absolutely. Likes are the golden currency on YouTube. So if you haven't left us one, what are you playing at? They don't cost a thing. Big hello to 1,000 Yard Stare, who's another new subscriber. Welcome as well. Thank you so much for being here. We've got Hacker, Hawkwind, Mr. D, Wandering Minstrel, Bravin, who's joined us from Kenya. We've got Sooty FM, who says, "Nwaneri is phenomenal. I'd say better than Saka was at his age. We have another star boy in the ranks." I was talking to Andrew from Arsblog yesterday, and he brought up a stat which I thought was really interesting. Ethan Nwaneri needs 150 minutes before March to have played more Premier League minutes than Bukayo Saka before 18. So, yeah, exactly. Big hello to George in the chat who says, "So devastated by the news." I know what you're referring to, and yeah, same. Horrible stuff. Really, really horrible news. It's the family thing, guys, that I won't get into on the podcast. It's not really the place for it, but we heard of a sad passing yesterday within the family, which is obviously really, really horrible. And my condolences go obviously to those most affected. What can you do? It's a tough one. He also goes on to say, "Was that your voice on the Preston game?" I don't know if you're trolling me because I've just been saying that. People have been saying that to me. Yeah, it was. It was. And thank you for listening. Okay, let's get into the chat then around this game. I've touched on that Carabao Cup game just briefly there because it gave us an opportunity to rotate, which means in theory that some of our key players should be that bit fresher for this one. It also gave the opportunity to Mikel Arteta to provide minutes to some players that are maybe on the fringes but could well be needed in the business end of the season. And as the season develops and goes on, we've had such rotten luck this season when it comes to injuries that you just need, don't you, to have everybody available and ready to go when those opportunities and moments come along for them, because you bring people in cold, and we've seen how that goes. Very, very often players that come in cold, they struggle and they find it difficult to get up to speed. And if you can feed them minutes in a competition that allows you to do so, look, let's be fair with the Carabao Cup thing as well, because there's been a lot of criticism for Mikel in recent years. People have said that he doesn't take the cup seriously enough. I don't necessarily think that that's accurate. I think that what you've seen is him obviously prioritise other things, but some of the draws that we've had in the cup competitions have been as rotten as they come. In this instance, this time around in the Carabao Cup, we've played Bolton Wanderers, a League One side, Preston North End, a Championship side who are struggling a bit this season, comparatively speaking, to what they sort of produced last time out. And then we've got Crystal Palace at home. So beat Crystal Palace at home, and we're in the semi-finals of a cup competition. So it has been favourable for us, the way that the draws have worked this time around. I mean, we were due it, given the games that we'd been served up in the cup competitions in recent years, the likes of City, Liverpool, etc., etc. But yeah, I think that not the result so much, but the performance and the fact that so many of those fringe players were able to come in and play quite well, I think will do us a lot of good. With the next few weeks being quite difficult. Newcastle away last season, I mentioned the fact that we were robbed there. It brings back bad memories. There were 3 reasons that goal should never have stood. As you can tell, I'm not over it. And I thought we were really, really unlucky to leave the North East empty-handed that day. And it's almost a year to the day as well, if you think about it. That was November the 4th, and we'll be taking them on again November 2nd, hopefully. Lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. I do want to look at some of the statistics around Newcastle United. We'll talk about what Mikel Arteta's had to say very, very shortly, so don't worry, we'll get there. But I do want to have a look at some of the statistics around Newcastle United and their season so far. In terms of the head-to-head between these two clubs in the Premier League, Arsenal are very, very dominant. Of the 58 meetings between the two clubs, the Gunners have won 35. There have been 11 draws between the two sides, and Newcastle have beaten us on just 12 occasions. In terms of recent meetings, we beat them 4-1 back in February. Comfortable victory for us that night, and I thought our performance was outstanding in that game. But obviously earlier on in the season, we'd gone to St James's Park and lost as a result of that goal that I'm still not over, clearly. If you go back to the 7th of May, which was the season before, that's 2023, we won 2-0 at St James's Park, but we were held to a really, really frustrating draw that January by Newcastle United. That was a 0-0 draw. And I guess you could say that's kind of when that rivalry that I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the pod, that little bit of needle sort of first showed its face. Because I remember coming away from that game thinking, how anti-football were Newcastle? Jesus Christ. Like, I never associated Newcastle in the past with that type of football, with that type of game. And I thought the gamesmanship was so clear to see. And listen, we do it at times, right? And I'm not going to be that guy that sits there and takes the moral high ground. But I remember coming away that day thinking, how comes it's good when they do it, but when somebody else does it, it's a problem? And I felt really, really aggrieved, actually, by not so much the referee for allowing it to go and to continue, which should never have happened, but more so because I felt that the coverage of it was just ridiculous. It was like, look at Arsenal moaning, whinging, complaining, etc., etc. Yet fast forward, 18 months down the line, and those same people that were talking about how streetwise Newcastle were and how clever it was are now saying that we are time wasters and we are anti-football and we are the problem with the modern game, etc., etc. So I just find it funny that people completely reverse their positions depending on the club that's being spoken about. If you go back to Monday the 16th of May, that was the season before, when we of course missed out on Champions League qualification. We suffered a 2-0 defeat at St James's Park, which ultimately turned out to be quite damaging. Form guide, Arsenal have won just 2 of their last 5 in the Premier League, which is a little bit surprising, but you've got to factor in that period, we've played Liverpool, we've played Manchester City, We drew both of those games, not the end of the world. We did beat Leicester and Southampton, but of course we suffered a shock, an unexpected defeat at Bournemouth, which has set us back just a little bit. In terms of the season so far, Arsenal sit in third. Newcastle United are in 12th position. They've won just 3 games this season. They've got 3 wins, 3 draws, 3 defeats. Where I think they're struggling, just looking at the statistics, is in front of goal. On average, they've only scored 1 goal per match, which for a side with that level of attacking talent feels a little bit below where they should be. They're not conceding a great deal though either. They're conceding just over 1 per match. 2 clean sheets, which isn't great from their 9 games, but as I say, they're not conceding more than 1 goal per game very often, which means that they can kind of get away with that, I guess. Their biggest win was a 2-1 win at St James's Park over Spurs. Our biggest win was that 4-2 victory over Leicester. Their biggest defeat came at Fulham, where they lost 3-1. Ours came at Bournemouth, of course, where we lost 2-0. In terms of top players across these 2 teams, when it comes to goals, Kai Havertz leads the way on 4 in the Premier League. Harvey Barnes and Bukayo Saka have 3 apiece. When it comes to assists, Bukayo Saka is out there in front of everybody with 7. You have to go to Martinelli and Jacob Murphy for joint second place, who have 2 apiece. So Bukayo Saka has 5 Premier League assists more this season than anybody else across these 2 teams. Thomas Partey leads the way in tackles. He's made 27 tackles in the Premier League this season. Bruno Guimaraes is second on 25, and Joe Linton is in third on 23. So those are some of the statistics going into this game. Let's have a quick review then of what Mikel Arteta has had to say in the lead up to this game. Of course, he's been speaking earlier today. He's been discussing the latest team news. I say discussing the team news. He never really gives too much away, does he, Mikel Arteta? That's the truth of it. He very, very rarely tells you what he's planning, who's going to play. He's very, very coy with that type of thing. And so, do we take his word for gospel? No, but I think there are times where we can kind of read in between the lines. He did talk about Gabriel earlier in the week as being okay after having to come off against Liverpool. And he's kind of followed that up today by saying it's good news on Gabriel. We've got a training session today. If he's able to get through that, then he will be in the squad. If Gabriel's in the squad, guys, Gabriel plays. And obviously he was at the centre, wasn't he, of that controversy last season. So I'm sure he'll have that extra bit of desire to go up to St James's Park and put that right. In terms of White, not sure. Mikel Arteta says we don't know yet. He hasn't been able to train, so we're going to have to see what happens. Ricardo Calafiori and Martin Odegaard, according to Mikel Arteta, are both definitely out. Now, that is no surprise to me. I'm not expecting to see Ricardo Calafiori back before the international break. And Martin Odegaard could be, but the suggestion has always been that if he does return before that international break, it's going to be maybe at Inter, maybe at Chelsea. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he's back in the next couple of games, because the boost that would give this group would just be unbelievable. Now, he might not be ready to play 90 minutes from the start, but having him back in contention, having him back in the group, I think is really, really important, because he gives this team so much. I remember when he was appointed captain, there was a big debate around whether or not he could be a captain. You know, is he that type of guy that's going to get stuck into people when they're not doing their jobs? Maybe not in the way that traditionally you'd expect a captain to do that, but he certainly is very vocal. He certainly does set the standards. He is, as I've said many, many times on this podcast before, the man with perhaps the best understanding of what it is that Mikel Arteta requires tactically. He's a very, very intelligent individual. And if you send him out on the pitch, you almost have your coach on the pitch that can guide the team and can set the team up and make sure that they're doing all the right things. I think that's why we always look quite well organised when Jorginho plays as well, because he's another one that falls into that bracket. You know, somebody who is essentially the coach's voice on the pitch. And I think that's really, really important. So I'm looking forward to having him back, but it isn't likely that he's going to play any part tomorrow. I know Mikel Arteta says he's definitely out, but Mikel Arteta says a lot of things. And if you take all of that as gospel, then very often you'll be turning around and calling the man a liar. So let's assume that he's being truthful with this one. and that Martin Odegaard's definitely going to be out. Some of you in the comments getting involved. What have we got here? Dark Arts Derby says, Hacker. Dial Tone says, no, Harry, the rivalry with Newcastle started when we lost to them away in 21-22. I didn't really feel that rivalry that day. I got to be honest. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're highlighting that game as, a game that was quite damaging to us. But I didn't come away from that game feeling like any ill feeling towards Newcastle. Like, I don't now, to be honest with you. If I'm being completely truthful, Newcastle are a club who, over the years, as a kid when I was growing up, I actually quite liked, because I enjoyed their style of football. I enjoyed how much they hated Manchester United as an Arsenal fan growing up in the height of that era as well. And it's something that's developed for me over the last couple of seasons. I wouldn't go as far back as that game. I thought they just beat us fair and square that day, to be honest. Okay. Let's talk about what the team might look like then. How would you set up this Arsenal team? I know what I would do. And what I would do is actually quite interesting, I think, because I probably wouldn't have done this maybe 2 weeks ago if you'd have asked me. But there was something that I saw in the Liverpool game that I think is almost justification for a decision that Mikel's been making in recent times that many of us have struggled to understand the logic behind. I'm just bringing up my tactics board so that I can share with you guys my starting 11 to play Newcastle at the weekend. Let's move over to that now then. So you can see it here. Let me just reduce the size of my huge head so that you can see the tactics board that a little bit better. There you go. There you go. All right, so Raya in goal, that's a no-brainer. Saliba will be at centre-back. Assuming that Gabriel is fit, then Gabriel plays alongside him for me. There's no doubt about that. But then you've got a question in the fullback positions, right? Because Jurrien Timber was taken off at Preston at half-time, I think with a view to him starting this game at the weekend. There is no Ricardo Calafiori. Would you like to see Jakub Kiwior at left-back? I think that's a debating point. I think there'll be some people that say, yes, do it, play him at left back and play Timber at right back, particularly if Ben White's not going to make it. And I think there'll be others that say no. I think that if I'm predicting what Mikel's going to do, and actually I do this now based on what we saw against Liverpool, I'd play Partey at right back and I'd play Timber at left back. The worry is that if Anthony Gordon plays on Newcastle's left-hand side, he could rip Thomas Partey a new one in terms of his pace. We all know that Partey lacks that, okay? But he dealt with it really, really well against Luis Diaz. So there's a part of me that thinks, no, he's proven and shown that he can do it. It's not the ideal solution, but if you play Timber at right back and then play Kiwior on the left, are we weaker? In theory, we shouldn't be, because Kiwior is actually a defender, whereas Partey is a midfielder turned defender. So I'm struggling with this in my own mind, but I think Mikel will probably go with this. I think this will be the back line that starts up at St James's Park. So Raya in goal, Partey at right back, Saliba, Gabriel as the two centre-halves, with Jurrien Timber in that left-back position. I think in the midfield, he then goes Declan Rice and Mikel Merino, who seem to work quite well as that kind of double pivot together. But that means that Rice plays to the right-hand side of that midfield duo, allowing him to protect Thomas Partey that little bit. I think you end up with Leandro Trossard playing in the hole. I think you've got Saka coming back into the starting 11 from the right, Martinelli on the left, and then Kai Havertz, the final name on the team sheet. And I think at times what you'll see is Arsenal sort of morph into this shape, which we've seen so frequently in recent times, which is almost that 4-4-2 when out of possession. Havertz and Trossard kind of playing like double false nines, but showing that they can be flexible as well. Either one of them can drop into the midfield and support and help, as we know. I think in this instance, it'll probably need to be Havertz more frequently, because I think that Newcastle have quite a physical midfield, and I think he's much better equipped to support Merino and Rice in dealing with that. You know that Partey is going to step in field when we have the ball as well, and that means that the back three will shift, the remaining back three will shift across a little bit, and obviously Timber's capacity to play as a centre-back helps us with that as well. So I think this is more like what you'll see Arsenal look like in possession, And out of possession, you probably see something a bit more like this. Either a 4-4-2 or it being a 4-5-1 at times. So that's the team that I would go with, but it's also the team I think that Mikel Arteta will go with as well. So it's a bit different this week. It's a prediction as well as being what I would probably go with as well. I think that makes the most sense. Let me know what you think in the live chat. I'd love to hear from you. I will share a score prediction in a minute, and I'll take some questions from you in the live chat. We'll get there in just a second. But if I could please ask, if you haven't done so already, guys, leave a like on the video. It really helps. We've only got 47 likes on the board at the moment, which when you think about how many people are watching is just simply not good enough. So please leave a like. It doesn't cost a thing. It really helps. Subscribe to the channel as well if you are new. Check us out on Patreon as well. The link is in the description below. We'll be bringing you a Patreon episode this evening, as well as a Patreon episode tomorrow, which will be our match day reaction piece. I'll be reviewing the Newcastle game in full on Sunday morning. As I said, I'm up at Molineux tomorrow, so I won't get back till God knows what time, probably 11 o'clock-ish, given it's a 5:30 kickoff. But yeah, lots of content coming your way over on the Patreon side of things. So if you don't want to miss out and you want to support the pod, you want to support me to keep delivering this product on a daily basis. Is it a product? Can you call it that? Show, whatever. Passion project is what I prefer to call it. But anyway, check us out. Help us out. Thank you so much in advance. Okay, so in terms of my score prediction, before I take some of your questions, I'm going for the famous old 1-0 to the Arsenal. That's how I see this one going. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think there's something about this Arsenal side in that they seem to, generally speaking, I know Bournemouth was a bit of an outlier in this, but they generally seem to be quite a lot more concentrated defensively when playing away from home. So I think we'll keep it tight. I think we'll limit Newcastle as much as we possibly can. Obviously, having Bukayo Saka back is massive because it means we pack so much more of a punch in attack. And I think as a result of that, we'll probably beat them. Or at least I'm hoping we'll beat them. I don't want to say words like probably because I might be jinxing something. But my prediction is that Arsenal go out and win on Saturday. And boy, do we need to. Because we have lost a bit of ground. I know I keep saying that the fixtures will even out and it will look very different. And I do genuinely believe that. But what a boost it would be going into this really tough week if we could go and win at a difficult place like St James's Park before that trip to San Siro, followed by the trip to Stamford Bridge. If you've got any questions, guys, just chuck them into the live chat and I'll take a couple before I say my goodbyes. There was one other point that I just really quickly wanted to make while you're doing that, which is with regards to young Ethan Nwaneri. Now, I made this point on the Ask blog or Askcast yesterday, and a couple of people messaged me saying, oh, that's a really good point. So I thought I'd share it with you guys because now that I think back on it, I don't think I made this point on the Preston Review pod. And not because I forgot or not because I didn't want to share it, but because it didn't really dawn on me until Andrew on Askcast's line of questioning led me to a point where I kind of formed and developed an opinion on the spot and then shared it. And that opinion is with regards to why Ethan Nwaneri, maybe in Mikel Arteta's eyes, is still not quite 100% ready. Now, I know we watch him play and we're blown away by his talent and we're really, really enjoying watching what he's doing and we're really, really enjoying the silkiness, the skill, the low center of gravity, the sharpness in the touch, the composure, the confidence, the bravery. We're all loving that. That goal the other night was truly sensational. But I started to think about why it is that when everybody else is calling for him to start, Mikel Arteta still feels that reluctance. And I don't think it's because he's worried about the talent. I think it's to do with the kid's physical build. The guy's 17, right? He's still got some growing to do. He's still got some building to do. But I think for a manager that places so much emphasis on physicality, and that is clear. I mean, our team is literally land of the Giants FC at the minute. Mikel Marino even said it the other day when he was speaking in a press conference. We are a really well-built, strong side because that's what Mikel Arteta believes is necessary and required, along with all the technical brilliance, of course, organisation, desire, all those other factors. in order for you to compete at the very top end of this division. And if you think about the midfield profiles that he's signed in recent times, Declan Rice, £105 million, very, very physical, powerhouse in the midfield. Mikel Merino, 30-odd million pounds, again, very, very physical, dual monster is what he's been called. And then you think about the midfielders that he's let go. Fabio Vieira, the complete opposite physically. Emile Smith-Rowe, someone who has bulked up a bit physically, but isn't someone that I'd associate with being a real physical player. And what that says to me is that Mikel Arteta needs, in his own head, for his midfielders to be of a certain build and of a certain physical strength. They need to have a physical presence. Martin Odegaard's probably the only one that you would look at and say, well, he's not exactly a powerhouse, but his running power is incredible. His aggression is incredible. And he has learnt to handle himself, I think, in this league much better as the years have gone by. He puts in so much, and you can kind of allow for him to be slightly short on the physical side. And when I say physical, I don't mean his running power, fitness and all of that. I mean, strength, brute strength. He's lacking maybe a little bit of that in comparison to the others, but his technical level is so high. And if you've got that in the others, you can accommodate that, right? And you can get by with it. I think the reason that Ethan Nwaneri, even in the absence of Martin Odegaard, was not getting the starts that maybe some people felt he should, is because physically Mikel Arteta's not really there with him yet. And I get that. And I'm not saying I even agree with it, but I think that that's what he looks at when it comes to Ethan Nwaneri, and that's what puts him off of starting him week in, week out. I think that's what put him off of turning to him and saying, you're going to be my guy now in the absence of Martin Odegaard. Partly that, partly the pressure that brings, asking a 17-year-old kid to replicate what your best player does week in, week out. It's a lot of pressure. I get all of that. But I do think that in a manager who prioritizes physicality over so many other things, you shouldn't be surprised when he doesn't pick the 17-year-old who, if he has one area in which he needs to grow, and I'm not just talking physically, it's probably that. Like, he needs to probably learn how to handle himself a little bit better, to protect the ball a little bit better, to protect his body, because you don't want him breaking down. I'm not saying I've seen any signs of weakness from Ethan Nwaneri, but physically his stature isn't that of Mikel Merino or of Declan Rice or of Martin Odegaard. And I think for that reason, when you're trying to take that decision, it's not about whether he's talented or not. I think everybody knows that he is. But I think Mikel feels that if he's just lacking a little bit physically, not only am I putting loads of pressure on a 17-year-old, but that shortfall I'll have in the physicality in my midfield could cost me as well. So I think that's to do with the decision not to just throw him in and say, you're my Martin Odegaard, go out there and do it. But anyway, let's go into the live chat and take a couple of questions before we sign out. Remember, leave a like on the video, check us out on Patreon, all of that lovely stuff. Leave us a review as well, especially on Apple Podcasts if you could, where we lost a load of reviews when we changed platforms. So please help us out with that. Okay, Benny says, who do you think is the first choice left back when everybody is fit, assuming Timber is the right back? I don't know. That's a really, really difficult question, because you say that you're assuming Timber is the right back, and I almost feel uncomfortable with saying that because Ben White is there too. So I just think we're in a situation where we need a squad. We need to be able to change it. We need to be able to rotate. We need to be able to cope with injuries. I don't think there is a clear first choice in any of the fullback positions right now. I think Calafiori is the guy at left back that Mikel tends to turn to the most at the minute, but obviously he's unavailable. Jurrien Timber is clearly the guy that he goes to next. He's done a brilliant job there, did an excellent job against Mo Salah last weekend, and I honestly believe that had he stayed on and had he been able to continue, we don't end up drawing that game. That's how important he was that day. But yeah, I think White is probably still the right back. I don't think that there's been a real shift there yet, but nobody's got any issue if Timber plays there. And I think Timber is very much seen as the guy that can fill in whatever hole that we have at this moment in time. Now, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, because he's certainly good enough to start every single week. We've seen that. But I think his versatility means that he doesn't have a fixed position on the team sheet, essentially. So yeah, it's an interesting one. A very, very difficult question to answer, but I think Calafiori is definitely the go-to left back right now. And then I think with Ben White's injury troubles right now, you could say Timber, but then you think about the fact that he sometimes puts Partey in there as well. And if it was the case that it was definitely Timber and that was his position nailed on, then would Partey be playing there? Maybe not. So yeah, it's a really tough one. I don't think there is a permanent solution at either fullback position at this moment in time. I think it's about who's available right now. Sooty says, given it takes time to settle in, what's your first impression of Marino? Do you think he'll become as good as Rice or Partey for Arsenal? First few weeks he was playing, I got to be honest, I was underwhelmed. Massively. He didn't look up to speed. He didn't look sharp enough. There were glimpses of what we probably signed him for. But I was underwhelmed. I thought the Liverpool game was the game that kind of marked his arrival, not just because he scored a goal, but with the exception of one silly error that he made in the first half that led to a Mo Salah shot. I thought he played quite well. And I thought that was the point where I looked at him and I said, okay, you're here now. You've arrived. It's taken a bit of time. Obviously, the injury didn't help. That set him back a while. But it felt like that was his arrival point at Arsenal. So I'm looking forward to him pushing on and kicking on and hopefully improving over time. Do I think he'll be as good as Rice or Partey? No, I don't. But I don't think anybody really expected that when we signed him. I think he was always someone to supplement the midfield rather than someone that you build a midfield around. And I think when you look at his age profile, which is an age profile that we don't tend to generally go out and sign. We have done on occasion, but we've always done sort of low-cost deals with players of that age, generally speaking. It always felt like a sort of, not a temporary solution, because that's harsh. It's like I'm talking about him as if he's 38 years old. But I think he's someone that is seen as a player that can help us maybe get over the line in the next couple of years rather than a long-term signing. One more question. With the January window fast approaching, who would be top of your shopping list to help us in the second half of the season? Top of my shopping list would probably be someone like Benjamin Sesko or Victor Gyökeres, but I don't think any of those are viable options for the January window, to be honest. To narrow it down to specific players, I think is difficult. I do feel like we need another midfield player, maybe more than we need a centre forward. I know that'll be unpopular. I know a lot of players will say centre forward, but I feel like we need another creatively competent midfield player. That's where I would go in the window, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what develops, of course. Remember, check us out on Patreon. We've got plenty of content coming your way on that platform over the next couple of days. Thank you to those of you that are already signed up for your support. Thank you to everyone that tuned in, whether that be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcast app. Really, really appreciate the love and support. We'll be back with a full episode on Sunday. Patreon episode tomorrow, of course. There's a Patreon episode dropping tonight as well, so you've got two coming in 2 days. Thank you all so much for your continued support, and fingers crossed, guys, we can go to St James's Park and take all 3 points to kickstart what is no doubt going to be a very stressful week. So whatever else you got going on in your lives, try and take it easy, because you're going to need all your capacity to handle stress for this next week as an Arsenal supporter. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.